and my name is Alexey Konoveyev. I work as an academic director in the content department at Skyeng, as you probably know. And today we're going to talk about teaching culture, because culture is a very tricky thing, and misunderstanding and misinterpretation of cultures can lead to a lot of cultural clashes and a lot of problems. So it's a good idea to explore what can be done, how culture can be taught, and how it can be incorporated into an online classroom. Let's do a few things first before we start talking about that. Here we see a number of clippings from newspapers. Without reading any text below the headlines, can you guess which country the newspapers are from? And if yes, what makes you think so?
Well, I guess it's the United States.
And why so? That's correct.
Well, I just saw the federal agents and just this political stuff that is really high in the US. So
that's right. So you talk about voters who are going to vote on whether they're going to vote. Then you talk about rallies, which are very popular. So basically, what helped you is knowing the culture and knowing the political structure and the federal agents and stuff like that. The only article which is not really a telltale name, which doesn't have a telltale name, is the one about scientists who are going to kill ducks to see why they're dying. These are all actual articles. These are real articles, and I really had a lot of fun trying to choose some interesting examples for you. And I hope you have fun reading those headlines. But you see that even the phrasing of the headlines and all those words which are related to the country's realia, all those things which you see in the life, can tell you which country it is from if you know it. So culture manifests itself in so many different ways, and in language as well. Now, here is an extract from a book. The extract is easily recognizable if you look at the content. Can you tell which book is it? Now, I can give you a hint. This is the book which has the largest number of copies printed in the history of mankind.
The Bible?
Yes, it's the Bible, but it looks very unusual, because this is the so-called Ebony Bible. It is written in Ebonics, a language of a one minority, or probably not such, not really a minority in the United States, and you see that there are websites and books are translated into this dialect. Now, if you look at this not only looks unusual, but I know a lot of people who will at least raise their eyebrows if they look at this, because they will wonder what this is, whether text should be changed or not. It's very much like you see the discussion in so many countries, like, for example, in Catholic countries, there is an ongoing discussion whether the prayers should still be said in Latin or whether they should be in the native language of those countries. A very similar situation happens in Russia, when you need to think of, when some people think whether the church services should be held in Church Slavonic language or whether they should be in contemporary Russian, and so on. But this is another feature of the culture. So it manifests in different dialects as well. And here are a few things which I hope you can tell me the meaning of. Like, for example, all these words mean one and the same thing. Those are dialect words, like Murphys, cheetahs, spuds, taters, and tatties. What are they? Can you give me the regular word for them? If not, that's okay, because I'm going to tell you later on.
A spud is a potato.
Yeah, that's right. These are all different regional words for potatoes.
Potato.
Yeah, they're potatoes. Next one. My English teacher was pulling my leg when she said that I didn't pass my final exam. What did she do?
She was joking.
Yeah, she was joking. That's a far more common expression than all those cheetahs and Murphys. Murphys is an Irish word, as far as I know. Next one. Dorian retired to Victoria, British Columbia, after 35 boring years of a paper pusher at a large factory office. So what did she do? What did she work as?
Was she a secretary, a paper pusher?
Okay, probably a secretary. And the last one.
Isn't it a pencil pusher?
There are different expressions. A paper
Right.
push is a pretty common one. Next one. He's at Her Majesty's pleasure now. What is he doing? Or what is Her Majesty doing with him? Any ideas? No, that's a not
Serving
a
the
smart.
queen. Serving the queen?
Not quite, but I'm going to tell you.
Meeting the queen,
Oh.
they are like meeting.
Meeting.
Yeah,
No, they're
yeah.
not in a meeting.
No?
Nothing intimate either. So don't be misled by the word pleasure.
So he would only be called when the queen invites him, or
well, the funny thing is that this is a very British expression. So he's at Her Majesty's pleasure now means he is in prison doing a term, and she can do as she pleases with him. And that's something which is not easily understandable, but that's another cultural thing. So if you come from a different country, you will probably not be able to decipher what it means, to deduce the meaning. And she was a paper pusher means that she was working with blanks and forms, whether as a secretary or whether as a clerk, whatever. But at least you can understand that she was working with paper. So these are all cultural things. And another thing, this was the slide that I posted on Slack. And many people correctly wrote that these colors, the names of these colors are royal blue and navy blue. That's why they're deeply rooted in the culture, because that's part of the naval uniform and part of the traditional color associated with royalty. Here are two more other blue colors. These ones, they're also called blue, but they also have some additional words to their names. Can you tell what blues these are?
well, that's baby blue, the lighter
Baby
one.
blue on the left, that's right.
Yeah, and I don't know. That still looks like navy blue. Royal? No, not royal blue.
Well, it does look similar, but
blue?
I'm not very good at telling shades apart. But this is supposed to be Oxford blue, so that's another British thing. But in fact, if you look at the blue palette, you will see lots and lots and lots of words like sky blue and all sorts of things. And the funny thing is that in Russian, for example, we would call baby blue. It wouldn't have a name associated with babies. We would just say голубой, which is a separate color according to the Russian language. But apparently in English it's still blue. It's just a shade of blue, which is technically correct. So these things also are also rooted in culture. So they can have different names, and they can be even considered to be two distinctly separate colors. It's very much like when men try to tell the difference between fuchsia and pink. So let's take a look at some cases where a problem rose because of the cultural things. So the first thing is this. This is a real story. An American businessman who was a top manager of his company flies over to China to have negotiations with his business partners. The CEO of the Chinese company is a lady. So the American businessman tries to be polite. He greets her and shakes her hand. Then they proceed to the table. It was supposed to be some sort of business lunch, I suppose. And he holds her elbow, like, sort of steering her towards the table, and moves the chair for her so that it would be comfortable for her to sit down. Then he passes around the business cards, his business cards, to everybody who is at the table, collects their cards, and puts all of those cards into his pocket. And in the end of the business lunch, but before the business lunch is over, he excuses himself, leaves the table, and calls his boss to report of successful negotiations. However, the deal is really in grave danger now. Why is the deal endangered?
Well,
This is nothing to do with language.
I'm sure of one thing, the business cards, and not only in
Mhm.
China, but in Asia in general,
Mhm.
it's considered impolite to just collect the cards and just put them in your pocket without looking at them. And you also have to give your card and take your partner's card with both hands as a sign of respect. So that's one thing. And I
Okay.
think,
Yep.
yeah.
They have this in China.
Elbow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not sure about shaking the hand because I guess right now in Asia it's a common practice as well. So maybe
Mhm.
that's okay.
Okay, any other ideas? Now, talking about the cards, the story about the cards is a distractor here because it is in Korea that you have to accept things, take things with both hands, and read the cards. The Chinese don't care about this. So you were correct, but this is a distractor. It doesn't work in China like that. You were right about holding the elbow. Now here, the man made several cultural faux pas. So all those false steps. First of all, you are not supposed to touch at least a high-standing lady, and he touched her by the elbow, even though he was trying to be helpful. Also, even though China is a much more open country, according to the business and culture textbooks, you are not supposed to shake a lady's hand there. And another very, very big problem is that he left the table before the lunch was over. In China, this is a direct insult to the hosts because they're not supposed to leave the table until the lunch is over. So basically, he insulted the hosts several times, even though in his opinion, he was only being polite and he was really, really trying to be polite. Here is another story. Now, in Greece, a waiter asks the guest how he liked his meal. And the guest, who doesn't speak Greek, he says, "Oh, I liked it. It was okay." But the waiter is really offended. Why do you think the waiter is offended?
I think in Greece it's impolite to show hand gestures.
Yes, certain hand gestures. Like, for example, this sign, the like sign, is very, very offensive in some cultures because in Greece and in Turkey, it means that somebody wants to have sex with you in a very rude way. And this gesture in some countries is also very, very offensive. Not only in Greece, by the way, but it is also, so it does not mean okay there, even though waiters normally understand these things. In some countries, it means zero. And in some countries, it means I'm going to kill you, as far as I know. So one has to be really careful with gesturing when you travel abroad. And one more thing. Now, this is something I was told in Grozny, the capital of Chechen Republic. Now, that's what happened there. A publishing house organized a big workshop there. So a lot of teachers came from all over Chechnya. The lecturer was a lady. So she came there because it was a hot summer day. So she came there wearing a blouse with short sleeves, and she was dressed in trousers as well. So in the first break, all the listeners just quit the workshop and they never came back, even though the workshop was meant to last for much longer, for two lessons longer. Why did they leave the workshop?
Perhaps because of the dressing, it wasn't appropriate for their culture.
Yeah, precisely. Women there are not supposed to wear their arms, and they're not supposed to wear trousers. Once I needed to go. I went there for a talk with the president of a teacher training institute, and then she wanted me to meet the president of a university, which was just across the street. And she said, "I must apologize, but I will not be able to take you there personally. I will ask my assistant to do that because I'm not wearing a headdress today, and they will look down on me if I enter their university without wearing a headdress. That would be a shame." So even though this is a part of Russia, they have some of their very, very own traditions, no matter how high the position of a person is. So these are all cultural things. But the problem is there any way of teaching this culture to students? What kind of culture do we need to teach them? How can we teach this culture without making the students feel uncomfortable? Because there are a lot of students who come from the same region who will say that, for example, it was the lecturer who insulted the listeners. And this is going to be their take of it. Like, for example, I had a friend, I was spending a year in the USA at a university teaching there. And I had a friend from Azerbaijan with whom we shared the flat because that was cheaper. And he went to California to visit somebody who had left his country a long time ago. She now had her own family in the USA. And when he came back, he was so shocked. He told me that, can you believe this? They have a teenage girl, a teenage daughter, and while the family was at table, she gets a phone call, and then she excuses herself and says, "Oh, my boyfriend is going to pick me up, so I must leave the house because we are going to the movies." And he said it was so offensive because, first of all, she openly tells that she has a boyfriend, and then she leaves the dinner table and the house without asking for permission. So I had to explain to him that it was a different country, different traditions, and the girl had grown up in the USA. So what she did was perfectly normal and was perfectly okay. And the guy was really shocked by these things. So when it comes to culture and cross-cultural communication, culture is not just the high culture like the arts, the ballet, and music, but it rather means a way of life, all sorts of customs, view of the world, and the ideas of what is right and wrong. And that's something we are going to talk about today. And if you come across an unexpected or unknown aspects of a foreign culture, they can cause culture bump or even a culture shock. And while culture shock is a very widely used term, culture bump is not so widely used, so we'll talk about that in a second. So what is perceived as normal and desired by a person from one culture can be seen as abnormal and undesirable by a person from a different culture. And therefore, a lot of success in communication is rooted in understanding those cultural conventions and deciding when you need to adhere to them and when you need to be aware of them, but decide to stick to your own culture. And if you have some set ideas about other cultures, the stereotypes, they sometimes can have a positive effect because sometimes a stereotype is right. It's not necessarily bad. There are a lot of positive stereotypes. Like, for example, when you think of British people in Russia, we have the stereotypes of British people as what? Gentlemen, usually. Even though if you look at British football fans, they don't seem to be very gentlemanly. Or, for example, so this is a very positive stereotype, which can really help in business negotiations and everything. So stereotypes, if applied correctly, can be a very, very helpful thing. So let's take a look at some of the techniques of teaching culture. First of all, we need to raise cultural awareness in our students, and we can use pictures, like, for example, ads from a particular country that can be culturally charged. I'm going to show you a different kind of picture, which provides a great basis for discussion. Then we can analyze videos for people's behavior. I quite like comedies, and I'm going to show you the beginning of some very old comedy. It's back from 1970s. Moreover, it would never be shown on British TV today, and you will understand why when you watch those 3 minutes of the comedy. But it's a brilliant thing to observe cultural behavior and cultural stereotypes, and then proceeding to discuss whether they're good or whether they're not good. Then we can ask students to match the cultural features and the country. We can use culture quizzes. I will show you an example. We can discuss what cultural features may make you feel uncomfortable. And then finally, we'll take a look at some of the case studies. We have already started using those case studies when I'm talking about Greece and about China and American businessmen. And an outcome of all these activities can look like this. Like, for example, you can ask your students to create a checklist or a guide for international travel or for meeting international partners. So basically, this can be used not only for business English, but also for teaching general English as well. So let's take a look at the next picture. It will be very easy to tell which the culture, which country it represents, because the name of the country is there. But you can use just the separate symbols. And I would normally ask students to explain those culture symbols. Why are they there? This is France. So can you explain all those symbols? Why are they associated with France? Well, we're not going to talk about all of them. But for example, what is so particularly French about the bike?
I associate bike with Netherlands, actually, not with France at all.
Yeah, we can have different associations. This picture was made by the British, so it's their association. Any other ideas? What about the bunch of purple flowers?
Well, you would imagine a street in France, and then you've got the baguette and the cheese and the macaroons.
Yeah, that's right. And the flowers are lavender, and France is famous for its perfume industry and huge fields of lavender, things like that. Then there's a French poodle, a musketeer, stuff like that. Now, if you look at the British cultural symbols, this is a rather more unusual picture than what you would normally see. But you see the rain, you see football, you see tea, you see Scottish bagpipes, you see a castle, you see a gentleman's suit, and you also see sheep. So it's probably related more to Scotland or Wales than England. But then again, there are some counties in England which are famous for sheep farming. Now, if you look at the Russian symbols, this is a little bit more difficult, and this is slightly different. Do you have any symbols here which can be interpreted as positive in one culture and negative in a different culture?
Yes.
Or probably absolutely negative.
Weapon,
yes,
for example.
Weapons.
In Russia, patriots see weapon as a power, and power in many Asian countries, and as we are a part Asian culture, power looks very good. Yes, so weapon equals power equals good. But in Western societies, weapons see as aggressive gesture, like showing weapons. So that's negative.
Okay. Is there anything else which may have a negative connotation?
Police.
Police. All right.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter and all this stuff.
I think it's an army man, not policeman.
Wow.
Well, that's something to discuss between, because we have two similar men, but they have different colors. Okay, how about what about vodka?
Well, it's nothing bad about it. It's like a native product, like a drink. Yeah, it's bad for your health and it leads to alcoholism. But in general, it's like macaroons or wine or baguette.
Oh, okay, just imagine that this picture is shown to somebody from an Arabic culture.
Yeah.
Would they think that there's nothing bad? Because we are talking about some symbols which seem to be okay to us, but they can be interpreted as something very negative. And what about the bear? Is this a positive symbol or is this a negative symbol?
The bear looks positive. This represents the wildlife.
Okay. Now, one of the explanations I've read one time, and I don't know whether it's correct or not. But the thing is that if you look at the bear in Russian culture, bear is definitely a very positive symbol, because if you read a Russian fairy tale, the bear is one of the positive characters. He is wise, he is a bit lazy, but he is usually kind, and he often helps the main character, or at least he helps to drive some danger away, because he is more dangerous for other dangers, like smaller dangers like wolves and foxes. But somebody told me, or rather I read somewhere, that, for example, in the USA, a bear is a much more controversial symbol, because Americans often think about grizzly bears, who are famous for their aggressive behavior, aggressive and unexpected. I don't know whether it's true, but in one of the articles, it was claimed that bears can be perceived as something unexpected and prone to aggression by Americans. I don't know how true it is. Very much like if you look at American bald eagle, bold is a good word in the USA. It's brave and so on. While in Russia, it does not have a particular good connotation. It's rather a neutral symbol, so something like that. Right, so we can ask students to take a look at these pictures, and there are plenty of such pictures, like free vector graphics, which you can use for even for commercial purposes. So it's easy to select these things and ask about associations and try to compare these things. If you're teaching an intercultural group, another interesting technique is to ask them to build an association chain. Because, for example, if you ask Russians what they associate with winter, they would normally talk about snow, cold weather, and so on. If you ask somebody from Britain what they associate with winter, snow is not normally on the top in the top positions of winter associations. Very much so when you talk about pensioners, because in Russia, a pensioner is an old lady who has nothing better to do than to take care of grandchildren and so on, although the stereotype is changing slowly. While in some countries, a pensioner is somebody who is finally free to enjoy life. So that can be different. Okay, so what we can do is we can analyze videos for behavior and stereotypes. And if you don't mind, I'd like to show you about 4 minutes from a comedy, a British comedy, which was made in 1970s. It's called Mind Your Language. And the reason why I chose it is because it is about a language teacher who is teaching international students, adult learners. Does any of you know this comedy?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So
Yeah, I
if you
watched a few clips before.
all right, excellent. Then I hope you don't mind watching one more clip. And what I'd like you to do is, while you're watching that, could you please, after watching, tell about what cultural stereotypes are used there? Okay? Yeah, because you get the idea, and you've seen lots of cultural stereotypes which were used here. So I think you will agree with me when I say that this is not a video that would probably be shown on on contemporary British TV. But what kind of cultural stereotypes did you notice there? There were lots of them every second.
Well, yeah, it's a very big list. Like, where to begin?
Okay, well, let me change my question. Which stereotypes would make the TV broadcasters abstain from showing this video now? What would make it impossible to show now?
Perhaps the comparison of the nationalities with the Japanese and the German.
Okay. What else would a lot of people find offensive now?
Well, I guess that Indian lady, because she looks like a typical housewife, and she's like uneducated, and she's just neat, and she can't even write her or say her name in English. So probably feminists would find it very offensive.
Okay, feminists would find it very offensive. What about the jobs? Do the people from different countries stereotyped in their jobs as well? Like, for example, if that's an Italian guy who works in a restaurant or something like that. Now, for those who have not seen this series, this is a brilliant series, the way I see it. They all of them learn to communicate with each other. They learn English, so it's really fun to watch. And they go through a lot of adventures together. And on the whole, this is a very, very nice series. Another thing that you could watch is another British comic duo, Two Ronnies, which used to be very popular in the UK in 1970s and 1980s. And after our webinar, I'm going to upload the presentation. So if you follow the links, you will be able to watch an episode about an Arabic guy who comes to a British shop and who tries to buy something, but his English is really poor. And you see how the British shop owner is at first rather rude to him, but then when he sees the money, he changes his attitude totally. So there are a few rather negative stereotypes in that episode, but they're still quite funny. So that's something that we can use with our students to make them aware of different cultural stereotypes and cultural differences as well, because you can always ask them whether what they've been shown is really correct or whether it's not so. Here are some countries. The next type of task is when you ask students, match the country and the customs from those countries. All of these customs are based on the Women's Day, even though Women's Day or Mother's Day happens on different dates in those countries, not necessarily like in Russia when it happens on the 8th of March. I'd like you to read these things and try to guess which custom belongs to which country. Like, for example, in this country, women on this day do not allow men to join them the whole day. So
Vietnam?
what country is it? Any ideas?
Italy,
Vietnam, maybe?
Maybe
Italy or Vietnam. Okay, I'm going to give you the answers, but we have at least two versions. All right, now in this country, this day is called Dolls Day or Peach Day, and girls dress up their dolls and make an exhibition of them.
Japan.
Japan, that's right. You're correct. Okay, and here women pour water on men on Women's Day. Any ideas? Okay, let's take a look at the next one. In this country, women have a day off and men work on this day. And in the evening, men give their women something which is called a fidelity pumpkin, a pumpkin of fidelity, into which it is carved into beautiful pictures and beautiful sculptures. And in it, they put a small phoenix bird, a figurine, some grapes, some spicy pork, some watermelon pieces, and fried pickled tomatoes. What country do you think this is?
It's China. It's a set of things which is like China.
Okay, it looks Chinese. Now, here are the answers. So in Italy, women keep their own company. They don't, they keep men away. In Japan, girls make an exhibition of dolls. This is Girls' Day. In Greece, women pour water on men. I was half expecting some of you to say Thailand, but Thailand has this custom, but only for Thai New Year. And in China, they have fidelity pumpkins with all those wonderful dishes inside. Okay, you can also ask your students to do a culture quiz. There is no need to put together such a quiz yourselves. You can use a ready-made one, but this quiz, unlike the regular quizzes, should focus not on the geography and political system and money or something, but rather on those things that people would or would not do every day. Let's take a look at one of such quizzes. It's a quick one, so it shouldn't take too long. Just a moment, and let's try to see the. Let's try to answer the questions. Just a second. Let me start it. Okay. There are a lot of rubbish quizzes, frankly speaking, on the internet. So it took me a while to find this quiz, but this gives you a pretty good idea what a cultural quiz may look like in comparison with a country studies quiz, for example. Like, for example, this one, the easiest, politest, and most English way to start a conversation with someone you don't know is to do what? Talk about the weather, say, hi, my name is this, how do you do? Recommend a good fish and chip takeaway place, or nod and smile and hope they come over.
Talk about the weather.
Talk about the weather. Okay, let's check. Yes, you are right. Okay, let's take a look at the next question. So as I said, there are only 10 questions, so we can do it very quickly. The correct response to how do you do is, which one is it?
How do you do?
How do you do, of course.
This is something very official. They don't do it these days.
Yeah, exactly. But still, this is the correct response. Now, when a woman gives another woman a compliment in Britain, what should the other woman do? For example, somebody says, your hair looks great, that color. Thanks, that's so nice of you to say. My boyfriend didn't even notice. Or, oh, I hate it. Oh, really? I find it a bit dark for my complexion.
Maybe the third one.
The third one?
Be a little
Okay.
critical of yourself.
Yeah, this is correct. So you accept the praise, but you don't go over the moon with it. While in Russia, a lot of people, when complimented, they tend to say, "Oh, it's nothing good, it's nothing new." So they pretend that this is not really something good. Okay, what is the polite upper class way of saying toilet?
Lou?
Yeah, it's the loo. I never knew it was upper class way. I kept saying it for so many years, and it turns out that's upper class. Okay. Next one. If you want someone to move out of your way, what is the most common way to ask?
Excuse me.
Excuse me. That's right. So the questions are not difficult. So you can use them with low-level students as well, but they all talk about culture, not just the use of vocabulary. Next one. Which society was created last? Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, Society for Public Health, Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, or Royal National Lifeboat Institution?
I think to children, cruelty to children.
Okay, let's check. But let me tell you, you're right, because the Corporal Punishment Act was passed down in the UK in 1986, and that was when children were forbidden to be given a beating at school. So it really was created later than everything else. Now, at Eton College, I gave myself away, actually. At Eton College, the last canning was in what year?
So yeah, 62.
62. Okay, I think so. No, it was in 84. So they kept beating their students until 1984. And who is not legally allowed to eat swans?
Is it something about the Duke of Edinburgh?
Okay, let's check. No, it's a college at Oxford. I have no idea why they're not allowed to eat swans, but this is the case. And which of these is not another word for chav?
It's not a chav.
If you know all the other words, I would congratulate you. I don't. Well, we can make a blind guess. So which one shall we choose?
Chaver.
Okay. Let's see if that's a trap.
That's a trap, definitely.
No. It's some chola, whatever that is. And the last question. Choose the correct English saying.
Cats and dogs.
Yeah, everybody seems to know that, even though so very few people use it nowadays. Okay, so this is a text. This is a test, and we scored 70%, which is not that bad. But you see how many questions we could not answer. Do you like this kind of quiz? Do you think it would be useful for the students? Probably not all the questions.
We were struggling with some of them, so
yeah, exactly. But that's because it is about culture, not language, and we are language teachers. We feel more comfortable with language. Now, how can we teach culture, basically? And let's take a look at some of other case studies. So this is Brazil. So let's think of how the situation is likely to develop. So you're in Brazil, you're talking with a local person, and his or her phone rings. So what will this person most likely do? Will he keep talking with you? Will he cancel the call and send a text message? Or will he stop talking with you and answer the phone call?
Well, I guess they just keep talking.
Okay. I'm going to give you the answers afterwards. Now, at dinner, you offer a glass of wine to your partner, who is a Mormon. What will he most likely do? Say thank you and drink the wine, drink without thanking you, or refuse the wine?
no alcohol.
Refuse.
No
yeah,
alcohol.
not allowed.
They will refuse. Okay. In the Middle East, a handshake means a start of negotiations or the end of negotiations.
Maybe more about the end.
Oh, like, okay, we have a deal. Probably. We'll check in a moment. If you're invited to a very late dinner in Italy, what should you do? Should you accept the invitation because it's fairly normal, or should you turn down the invitation because those Italians might mean something else by this? And when we say late, we're talking about 10 p.m. or something.
Maybe accept the invitation. All of these southern people, they like food and maybe they eat it all the time, and it's rude to not accept invitation to dinner in a food cult culture.
Okay, and the last question. In Mexico, when you pay with a banking card, what should you do? Should you put it on the counter? Should you hand it to the cashier? Or should you hold your card and swipe through the terminal personally? What would be the culturally appropriate thing to do?
Maybe it's more about the trust there, so you have to hand it to the cashier. Handshake.
Okay, so here are the answers. In Brazil, if somebody receives a phone call, they will most likely stop talking with you and start chatting on the phone, because it is rude not to answer. In their country, it's rude not to answer when somebody phones you. A Mormon will refuse the wine, as you said correctly. Now, in the Middle East, a handshake is only the start of negotiations. They show that they're prepared to talk with you. In Italy, late dinners are absolutely a normal thing. So a dinner at 10 p.m. is okay, even if you're on a diet. And in Mexico, you should hand the banking card to the cashier. If you put it on the counter, it will be the equivalent of throwing the card or throwing the money in the cashier's face. It is very rude. And if you hold on to it and swipe through the terminal personally, this may also look very weird, as if you don't trust anyone, something like that. And when we call about culture bump and culture shock, sometimes you may feel uncomfortable when you encounter foreign culture. And this situation is called culture bump, so it's for a single case. And if you get very stressed for a prolonged period of time, then it's called a culture shock. And funny enough, but when you move to a different country, you normally go through a few stages. The first stage is the honeymoon stage, as you probably know. You enjoy everything. Everything is so wonderfully different. It's so interesting. But then you move on to the next stage, which is frustration. You start being irritated by people reacting differently. You don't understand why they react to everyday things in such a different way. You start missing the food and everything. And frustration stage can last several months. Then you begin to adjust. You think, oh, I understand why they react so. It's probably okay. And finally, if you're lucky enough, you will accept the culture and become bicultural or polycultural. So what can we do to prevent those frustration stages, culture shock, and so on? One of the things is this. You can raise your students' cultural awareness by explaining to them some situations and asking them whether those situations might make them feel uncomfortable. Like, for example, let's talk about yourselves. Imagine that you're in Ethiopia, and one way of showing affection in Ethiopia is to feed other people you are eating with. So if someone reaches for your mouth with some food, you have to eat it there. Otherwise, you may be seen as rude. Would you feel uncomfortable in this situation, or would you say, oh, it's okay?
It definitely seems uncomfortable unless I know about the culture beforehand.
Okay, so that's where you can get a culture bump, if not a culture shock. Now, next one. In Japan, it is a very typical situation when they ask your age or when they meet you for the first time, because their language demands to show flexibility, and they have to use different kinds of address to address people of different ages. So it's important for people to know your age. Now imagine that somebody meets you for the first time and asks you directly, how old are you? Would that make you uncomfortable?
No, not really.
Okay, not really. And finally, in the UK, you are not supposed to jump the queue. If you're queuing up and somebody jumps the queue and squeezes into it in front of you, what would your feeling be?
Quite furious, of course.
Okay, and here's the most important thing, of course, because that's how you feel about that. What about somebody else? Is there anyone who would say, okay, I let it pass? They probably are very short of time.
Not in Russia.
Okay, so it would probably get quite a reaction in Russia as well. Although about 20 years ago, we had a lot of people who would occupy places in different queues and run from one queue to another if they thought that this queue was moving faster. I don't know if you remember that. I remember those things. They used to happen quite a lot. And the last time I saw this was back in 2009, I think. And those were two girls from Penza, I think, because we were flying together from Egypt, probably something like that. Okay, and now we come to the final question. How can we tell students how cultures can differ? Do we just describe and explain every single case as we come across it? Or is there some other way to classify these things? Well, actually, there is a way to classify those things. Cultures differ in priorities. Like, for example, there are cultures which are rules-oriented, and there are cultures which are oriented towards relationships. There are cultures in which individual is more important than the group, and vice versa. There are cultures which differ according to their involvement in work. And I will give you some examples of how the behavior should be different with people from those cultures. There are cultures who are emotionally neutral, and there are cultures who are very emotional, and emotional is good for them. There are cultures which are focused on achievements and cultures which are focused on status. There are monochronic and polychronic cultures, so they have different attitude to time. There are cultures which differ in their locus of control. So let's take a look at some examples. Like, for example, in the rules-oriented country, the saying is law is above all. What does it mean? It's important to demonstrate how actions relate to rules. So if you work in the environment of this culture, people need clear instructions. They need to know what the rules are. Unless they have the rules, they will probably go and ask you, what is the rule? In the culture where relationships are more important, they would say, okay, here's a friend, so let's overlook this law or let's overlook this rule. And in these cultures, you need to let people make their own decisions because building a good rapport is the most important thing. So rule countries are the USA, Canada, the UK, the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland. We could continue the list. And the relationship countries are China and Latin America. By the way, where does Russia fall on this list? Are we more of a rule country, more of a relationship country, or are we somewhere in the middle?
I think we're a relationship country. It's
okay, more of a relationship country.
More. I think we're more of a relationship, yeah.
Okay. Next kind of cultural dimensions. What is more important, the individual or the group? In individual countries, man is free to make decisions and must take care of himself. And there is a saying, a man is his own army. So in this, if you work with people from those countries, you need to let people make decisions and show how their needs are related to the group's needs. Okay, this is the decision you've made. This is going to be also good for the group because of this, this, and this. Now, in the group cultures, society is more important than one person. We have a Russian saying, "Один в поле не воин." One man cannot go to battle. We have to do things as a group. So in such working with such people, you need to emphasize the importance of rules and to consider what people need when you make decisions. So here are some more examples again. Individual cultures are the USA, Canada, and the UK, the westernmost countries from the Russian geographical perspective. And the group cultures are Latin America, Africa, and Japan. It's funny, though, how these cultural divisions start in the West and go to the East and to the South. Next one is involvement in work. In diffuse cultures, work and personal life are closely connected. People live by working. And you need to, first of all, build good relationships at work. And you cannot refuse communication outside work. Like, all those team building events, going out together, going to the nearest bar after work, and so on. And in concrete cultures, work stays in the office. And relationships with colleagues play no role in personal everyday life because work stays back in the office. There you need to act directly, focus on goals, give clear instructions, and try not to talk about life in general because there's work to be done. So some examples of diffuse cultures are Argentina, Spain, India, China, and Japan. And concrete cultures are, once again, the USA, the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany. Of course, you cannot say that relationships with colleagues play absolutely no role in life. You can make friends with colleagues and so on. But in fact, work is work, personal life is personal life. Where does Russia fall in this coordinate? Are we more of a diffuse culture where work permits everything? Or are we more of a concrete culture where we can abstract ourselves, distance ourselves from the work situations? And we don't normally talk at home about work.
I think we're more of a concrete culture because it's not a must, it's not a necessity. If you have good relationships with your colleagues, you can extend your relationships outside of work, but it's not obligatory.
Okay, but do you discuss work issues at home?
That's kind of a new generations like millennials and Z generation. They actually, you could say, they are alike in the most in the developed countries and even in Russia, because they even in Japan you put it in a diffuse country, but even in Japan, young people, some people work, but it's mostly about corporate people. And the same as in Russia, if you see somebody working in office for big corporation, they can work 12 hours every day, 10, 12 hours. It's crazy for me. For me, it's just insane. But people work like this. Same goes for people in Japan. They also work a lot. If they work in corporate, if they don't work in corporate, they work 8 hours. So I just know people from United States, from Japan, from China. Some people work a lot. A lot of people, they are like, it's fine. It's okay.
Okay, so it's difficult to put a borderline here.
It's difficult to put
cultures are
a country in this. You can put people, I would say.
Okay, so it's more of a generation thing now than it used to be the country thing. Okay, then there are countries which are emotionally neutral and countries which tend to be emotional. So, for example, in neutral countries, you need to keep emotions under control, preserve a cold mind, sometimes a poker face, stiff upper lip, and so on. So you're not supposed to show emotions, and you need to speak to the point. In emotional countries, people wear their hearts on their sleeves. It is important for them to be able to show emotions, be it at work, in public places, and so on. And when you work with these people, you need to show an emotional attitude to show that you care. And you need to manage conflicts before they become personal, not unless, but before they become personal, to prevent them from becoming personal. So some neutral countries are the UK, Sweden, the Netherlands, Finland, and Germany, according to cultural anthropology. And this is exactly the branch of science that studies these things. And emotional countries are Italy, France, Spain, and Latin America. Once again, what about Russia? Are we more of a neutral country, or are we more of an emotional country? Or is it more of a generation thing?
I think we're definitely emotional. But,
emotional. We need to see that colleagues care for our well-being, for how we spend the weekend and everything. And if the colleagues don't ask us questions, we would probably feel a little bit offended. Okay.
So in my country, I noticed that it's still a mix of the both. So I'm talking about Pakistan. And so it's basically a mix of neutral and emotional. I see that the new generation, they wear their heart on their sleeve for sure.
Okay, so it is becoming a generation thing in your country. That's really interesting to see how one thinks, how cultures differ in different countries. Another cultural dimension is contrast between achievement and status. There are countries in which it does not matter what social status a person has. People look at his or her achievements. If there are good achievements, then that's great. This person will have a lot of prominence, no matter what the status is. It can be a low-level social status person, but if he does a lot, he will be respected. And when you work with people from such countries, you always need to acknowledge achievements. You need to show by example to achieve things yourself. And being called a boss will not bring you many benefits. And you call people by the job title only when necessary. While in status countries, position in the society determines your behavior. Like, for example, if you're a boss, you're supposed to come later than other people to a meeting. You are not supposed to come to be on first name terms. People are often called by the job title, like, for example, engineer Medisabal or something like that. You need to show respect to people no matter what they do. And you have to be very, very careful not to put somebody into an awkward situation, because this will not be forgiven. So the achievement-oriented countries are, again, the USA, Canada, Australia, Scandinavian countries, and the status countries are France. So France is different here, although it's a Western European country. You really need to think of what position a person occupies. Italy, Japan, Saudi Arabia. So that's basically Latin countries, Latin cultures, and Southern countries. What about Russia? Is Russia more of a status or an achievement country, or is something changing? And what about Pakistan, by the way?
Well, again, it depends. I would say that it's more achievement-based.
Mhm,
But I would say that achievement and status kind of go hand in hand.
mhm.
So it's a mix of the both. I really can't be direct with one part.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. And anyone, how about Russia? Is Russia more of an achievement country now or more of a status country?
I do believe that we are still more of a status one, because if you're a boss, if you're a big boss, you're supposed to have a nice suit,
Mhm.
some very expensive watch, and so it's closer. We're in this way we're closer to Japan.
Uh-huh. So yeah, so you need to emphasize your status.
So it's a little bit. It's a lot about non-verbal things.
Mhm.
So we are showing our status with the way we dress, the way we speak, and many other ways.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have nearly exhausted this kind of classification. So please bear with me for a few minutes longer, and we'll take a look at some cases which really depend on these things. Now, then there's also attitude to time. Like, for example, some cultures like precise planning. Everything has to be done in its own order. You have a plan, time is money, you have to stick to the plan. And you have to be punctual and keep deadlines. In polychronic countries, you can do several things at the same time. And in the workplace, you also have a lot of things which you need to do simultaneously. And that's why plans are flexible. So, for example, if you're not finished by the deadline, you can extend the plan a little bit, and it is not perceived to be a huge problem. So you have to be flexible working with those people, but at the same time stress the importance of meeting deadlines. And monochronic cultures of Germany, the UK, the USA, and polychronic are once again Japan, Argentina, Mexico. In Russia, I have observed a mix of both things. So it is more of a corporate culture. But then again, attitude to time shows not only in work, but also at, for example, you are invited to somebody's place for lunch or for dinner. And you know that the lunch time is, for example, or dinner time is 7 p.m. So in monochronic cultures, people will turn up at the appointed time or a bit early, like 5 minutes early. In polychronic cultures, people may come later, and sometimes much later, and they will not see the problem there. Like, oh, okay, you said 7, now it's only 7:30. What's the problem? I'm here. I had other things to do on the way. That's why I'm late. I was unavoidably detained, something like that. And finally, locus of control. That means who is the key factor. Like, for example, if you have an inner locus of control, that means that you have power over circumstances and you bear the responsibility. So in these cultures, you let people set their own goals and learn and discuss if they're not happy with something. And if you have outer locus of control, you have the other saying, man proposes but God disposes. And that means that people tend to avoid conflicts and they wait for outside appraisal. It is not enough for them to know that they have done their work well. They need to be told, you're okay, you've done a good job. So for this, with these people, you need to provide them with resources, give clear commands and appraisal, help to solve conflicts quickly and quietly, and keep to cheer people up to motivate them. And once again, here are some examples of different cultures. Apart from the things mentioned, cultural differences show in gestures, as you said, in interpersonal distance, how close you keep to these people, in loudness of conversation. Like, some countries people speak louder than in other countries. In some countries, loud speaking is considered to be impolite, while in other countries, people say, I'm an open guy, I'm honest, I've got nothing to hide, that's why I'm going to speak loudly. By formality in clothes, by attitude to touches. Like, in some countries, people keep touching each other, like, shaking hands, patting on the shoulder, giving a hug, giving a kiss on the cheek. While in other countries, people don't touch each other. There are countries in which you are not supposed to touch certain parts. Like, you're not, in Asian countries, in some Asian countries, you are never allowed to touch somebody's head or even pass something over somebody's head because head is considered to be sacred. part of the body. Attitude to the elder, like, whether you are allowed to make jokes about elderly people or whether you are not allowed to make jokes in elderly people. And in this way, for example, in Russia, you are not supposed to joke about the elderly people, while in the UK, this is okay. The attitude to gifts, whether gifts should be expensive or whether they should be just small souvenirs. Attitude to family, whether you should be interested in people's families and ask them about them, and people will be happy to tell them about their families, or whether people would just think like, no, why is he asking about the family? What has he got to do with it? And so on. And in communication, these features make up what is called communicative behavior. And when expectations and reality clash, we said that it may lead to culture shock, even if you speak the language like a native speaker. Let's take a look at some examples as to what shocked Brits about the USA and vice versa. Like, for example, this is what some Brits write on different web forums about the USA. They say, like, for example, everything is so much bigger there, or they have sales tax, and that's something which they don't have in Britain. They have a different kind of tax. Or as a Londoner, I had to learn to speak much more slowly as I got tired of being impatient about saying everything 3 times. And like, for example, if you're in Texas, people speak much slower there. But though again, there are some parts of the USA, like New York, where people speak much faster. Or, for example, this is one Brit said, I still find it hilarious when people refer to a 100-year-old building as historic. And holidays in the USA highlighted loneliness. I don't know if you would have the same attitude, but this is what a Brit thought. Like, for example, certain holidays never really meant anything to them. And this is what Americans say about the UK. Like, all the food is beige. The underground system is ridiculously hot all year round. You're about 12 times too much for England, too loud, too crass, and so on. The customer is not always right. The customer is so boring and being done a massive favor. And you can see a different treatment to service in different places in the USA and in the UK. Brits just don't ever complain. That's true. Brits tend to be very, very subtle about showing that they're not happy with something. Very often, other cultures take it as a hint or just don't see the hint at all. And so on. We're not going to spend much more time because there are some other things. But if you're interested, you can read through the slides. And what I'd like you to do is this. By the way, if you're interested, there is a wonderful channel on YouTube, which is called Joel and Leah. There is a young guy and a girl who tell how the USA and the UK are different. They've traveled to the USA, so they often compare things. Like, for example, here are a few videos, like things that are normal in America but weird in the UK, and so on. And that's how cultural difference shows. So they really are two countries, sometimes divided by the common language. Sometimes you need to teach people and to teach your students to see a hidden meaning. Like in this example, like, for example, you ask your students, this is an example from a Russian textbook, but here you need to read several accommodation advertisements, like, rental advertisements, and you need to understand what the owner of this place who is going to rent it to you really means by this description. Like, for example, a separate flat within landlord's house set in a quiet, peaceful location. Little garden, friendly family, price negotiable, car essential. So car essential and a quiet, peaceful location are all very nice words, but it probably means that this is 10 miles away from civilization, something like that. So this kind of exercise also works because it is also rooted in culture. And for your lessons, to develop your lessons, you can use case studies. We have seen quite a number of case studies today. So here are some more things, and we're finishing in 2 minutes. Actually, here are some case studies. Here is what a Hungarian guy wrote about a German colleague. He said, I think my German colleague is not good at English. I told him that I have a problem with my job. He did not help me. Somebody told me to ask him directly to help me to solve the problem, but I think he does not understand my question, or he is simply impolite. This case shows different attitude to locus of control. Like, if you need help, a man is his own army, but if you need help, you need to go and ask directly. This is the viewpoint of one culture. And in a different culture, they will say, okay, I've told that I have a problem. Why did he jump at helping me? Something like that. Or probably attitude towards time. This is how it can manifest itself in different culture clashes. We started a joint project with German, Austrian, and Croatian partners 1 year ago. The lead partner was a company from Germany, but the kickoff meeting was organized by us in Hungary. In advance, the German partner sent us an agenda in details, like greetings 5 minutes, 2 breaks, 2 by 10 minutes, presentations 15 minutes, question time 20 minutes, and so on. First, we thought it is only a framework, and it can be modified in case here there are not typos. I've just copied what other people wrote. So it can be modified in case of new ideas or new issues to be discussed. But I was surprised when the German colleague told me, it is not question time now. I wanted to ask something when he was presenting. Once again, this is the difference between monochronic and polychronic cultures. Time is money and plans are flexible. And one more thing, let's try to solve this case study, and this will be the end of the webinar. So Mayank has been working as an information officer at the foreign consulate in New Delhi for several years. His boss, Hendrik, wants to reward Mayank for his hard work and offers him a promotion and pay rise to become an information clerk. Mayank politely declines the offer, leaving Hendrik confused. Why do you think Mayank refused the promotion? And what should Hendrik do now? Any ideas?
He's untouchable. He can't be promoted.
Okay.
Well, not untouchable. I mean, he's in some kind of a caste which is cannot be promoted, for example.
Okay, that's an interesting idea. This is actually not the case, but the idea is interesting. Now, it is rooted in culture, but in a different way. Does anyone else have any other ideas?
Well, probably it's considered impolite to just jump at the offer, because this way he would accept that he's so good, he's so great, that he deserves this promotion. So probably it's just polite to decline a few times.
That's right. Decline a few times, be offered again. So if Hendrik would really like to reward him, he needs to come back to Mayank and once again, at least once again, offer him the same promotion. Because if should he believe that Mayank doesn't really want that job, he will be very, very wrong. So this is the thing. This is the culture clash, which may cost somebody a promotion if you don't realize that people have different ideas. Okay, so this was less practical probably than most of my other webinars, although I tried to show different ways, and we learned by doing, by discussing case studies, by taking a look at differences in culture, seeing some examples and everything. So tell me, please, what information today did you find interesting?
I've learned some new cultural dimensions because I studied some of them during my university studies. I knew some others, and some of these were new to me. So maybe you could give me a link about to read more. Maybe there is I'm sure there is some textbook where I can get more information about cultural dimensions.
Okay, so at least it has broadened your outlook. Okay, this is great. Anybody else? Did anyone else find anything interesting? Because culture is a very, very broad subject.
Well, it was in general interesting, you know. It's I work in the similar, a little bit similar way with some culture stereotypes, especially in business. I like to show students comparisons between Japanese corporate culture and the United States corporate culture in the way that you did, like this versus that. So, but it was nice to see a lot of stuff. Yeah, learned some, actually, a couple of new things about culture. It's always interesting for me, for example.
Oh yeah, we're starting a new business English course very soon at Skyeng, and it is all centered around case studies. Most of them are business case studies, not culture case studies. But still, this is going to be very, very interesting. Okay, and is there anything that you're going to use with your students in the near future, or you're going to use in the lessons in the near future to write lessons or whatever?
I want to try test. It's actually, I had an idea about it, but I forgot about it. And test is kind of reminded me about this. I wanted to try test, find some information about the culture and make a test in like Google Doc, for example. Because you said it yourself, searching for the right test takes forever sometimes. So
yeah, that's right.
guess
It's much easier
just
to write to create a test yourself.
Yeah, so I guess I will do it myself, kind of a short test for a student.
Okay, thank you very much. Because if you're interested in this kind of information, here are some links on this slide, links to different case studies. And the last link at the bottom of the page leads to a Peace Corps cross-cultural workbook, which really helps to understand, and it has a lot of explanations about how different cultures work, and it provides different cases and explains what you should do or what you should not do to work with those cultures effectively. So you will have a lot of information there for the test. Okay, thank you so much. It has taken us a bit longer than we expected because the topic is so broad and it's really interesting to talk about. So thank you so much for the meeting. Thank you so much for the time. I'm going once again to upload the presentation. I'm going to correct one typo that I noticed. I'm going to upload the presentation and the video recording for your use. And I will be happy if you use some of the resources, some of the ideas which I put together for you. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.